Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag where I answer your hot takes, observations, questions, and ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else. I posted on the YouTube community tab. You left your comments on my Discord server. Link is in the description of that. We are powered as always by BetUS. It is a Saturday mailbag. Most of you will watch/listen to this on Sunday and Monday. We go down the stretch in Montreal, which has been a very rainy event, and there have been a lot of wild results, I think, on both sides, but certainly on the men's. Favorite right now would be Zverev, who's alive in the bottom half. After that, Rublev, but we're looking at semifinalist either Hurkacz, 25 days after meniscus surgery, or Alexei Popyrin. We're looking at Kei Nishikori or Matteo Arnaldi making a Masters 1000 semifinal. Very different scenarios there, but both surprising. And there are just a lot of matches where you look at it and the circumstances and the preparations vary so drastically. I mean, Taylor Fritz played Sebastian Korda today. Korda has been playing with these Wilson U.S. Open balls, which, by the way, a lot of players have been complaining about, saying that they're difficult to control. He's been playing with these balls on these hard courts now for 2 weeks and won the title last week in D.C. And, you know, Fritz is coming over from Paris off of the clay. And it's like, yeah, Korda's going to have an advantage in that match. It doesn't mean that he's going to win. It doesn't mean you know before the match that Korda is going to beat Fritz, but you know that his preparation was better. The Medvedev loss to Davidovich Fokina, that's a really bad loss for Daniil. I mean, you could say that Medvedev's not in good form, and that's the root cause of that. And you'd have an argument, but that's a bad loss for Daniil. He's coming over. Foki played Washington last week. He's been here. It's a pretty bad loss for Tommy Paul, coming over from Paris. Brandon Nakashima, he played Washington. So I think we're seeing a lot of that. And the one I just watched, Andrei Rublev. Now, good to see him playing well again. I've talked about how there are all these different reasons why players skip the Olympics, and that you've heard a lot of different reasons, but a lot of them are, the surface change. In some cases, it's, I got to work on my ranking. Like there are different things, although that one is not one that players like to openly admit. For Rublev, it was interesting to hear him say, I felt like my form was so bad and my behavior was so bad that we all decided, me and my team, that I needed a break. So it seems like Rublev has reset mentally and just taken a rest. Has really helped Andre. And then he plays Jannik Sinner, who has had to play 2 matches in one day tonight. And maybe he could have gotten through this tournament and been successful in this tournament, defending his title in Canada, had he not had to play twice in a row. But clearly, at this point, coming off of the tonsillitis, he was not in good enough shape to play 2 matches in one day. Because especially in the third set of that Rublev match, his feet weren't moving. And Andre played incredibly well, but Sinner his footwork was not energetic enough to play effectively, period. So that was interesting to see. But yeah, a lot of circumstantial results and, interesting variance in terms of how players are coming into Canada. So that's all. That's all for my opening remarks. Let's get into the mailbag. Obviously, there is a lot of Djokovic, Alcaraz tactics stuff because this is the first mailbag since the gold medal match in Paris. And then, of course, off the top, there's this massive story with Stefanos Tsitsipas parting ways, in terms of coaching duties at least, with his father, Apostolos. It's always awkward to say, like, Stefanos and Apostolos split. It's like, well, still his dad. All right, so the first comment and the most liked comment is about that. It comes from Sports Fan. Hey, Gill, have you seen Tsitsipas's recent comments about his father and coach? It seems he is finally realizing that he has hit a wall in his career and is frustrated with his recent results. In what ways do you think Tsitsipas needs to improve to be a contender at these big events? Do you think a coaching change would help, or does he need to fix his game mechanically and or tactically? Once an ATP Finals champion and two-time major finalist, he looks to be a huge level below the top title contenders now. This comment was actually before he announced the split from Apostolos. This comment is following, or was following, Tsitsipas's post-match remarks. He also took a bad loss to Kei Nishikori. I mean, maybe if Nishikori really runs the table and shows that he's playing a top level right now, it might look a little different, maybe, but we'll see. Regardless, Steph after the match basically said, I'm really disappointed. He said he was very disappointed with his father and that he wasn't being heard and listened to, and that the collaboration was not what he wanted. And then the next day he announced that they were going to end the coaching relationship. Let me start here. Tennis is unique because the player is always accountable. It is up to the player to put the right team in place and to absorb what the team has to offer and utilize it and implement it in the best possible way. And that goes for winning and losing. When players win, it's them. When players lose, it's them. It's not like other sports where you can look singularly at a coach and say, well, perhaps they didn't do a good job. Because in tennis, when the coach doesn't do a good job, that's the player. So tennis is very unique in that way. I like to point that out and get that out of the way, because any criticism of Apostolos and maybe the shortcomings that he's had as a coach, which is also in tennis very difficult to measure, harder than some other sports where you can look at someone in control of lineups and tactics in a much more concrete way. But any shortcoming that Apostolos may have, that has always been Steph's responsibility and only his. So look, from a pure trajectory standpoint, this is the right move right now for Tsitsipas. This is good for his career. It had to be done. Based on the simple fact that I don't know exactly when his birthday is, but he's 25 years old right now, and essentially years 24 and 25 have looked worse than years 21, 22, 23. It's looked worse. And, you don't want to make rash decisions based on 6 months of struggles or even maybe 1 year of struggle is not enough to really say, okay, I need to force a change and try to shake things up and do something different. But look, at the end of the day, like Tsitsipas, he finished year-end number 4 2 years in a row. Year-end number 4 2 years in a row. And he finished 6th in the world in 2019 and 2020, the 2 years prior. Last year, he was year-end 6 again. The number, to me, doesn't tell the full story, because the best thing he did all year was January. So if you're going to look at it from a timeline standpoint, he made a major final to start the year, and then the rest of the year, there weren't a lot of weeks where you could say that was a good run by Steph. That was a run he can feel really good about. Like those weeks were few and far between after Australia. So now you're looking at, a 10-month season, the last 10 months of the year, where you're lacking productive results based on the standard that he had set. This year, it just hasn't been very good other than Monte Carlo. Hasn't. Here's a damning stat. In the last 52 weeks, Stefanos Tsitsipas is 18 and 20. Sorry, reverse that. 20 and 18 against top 50 players. 53% win percentage. So it's kind of been a toss-up in the last year when Tsitsipas goes up against a top 50 player if he's going to win the match or not. So trajectory-wise, he had to do it, right? Pretty simple. I don't think anybody's arguing with that. What has fallen off for Tsitsipas? Largely, I think it's been mental. I don't think he has consistently had the same focus, competitive drive, fighting spirit, composure. Like, those things to me have fallen off compared to where he used to be at. Belief as well. Because as much as you can hone in on something like the backhand return or the backhand defense or the fact that his slice isn't that good. Wasn't good in 2021. Wasn't good in 2022. But he was finishing year-end 4. So how do you explain that? And I don't subscribe to the fact that, okay, players have figured him out. No, everybody knew what Tsitsipas's weakness was in 2022. It wasn't in 2023 when the light bulbs went off and people realized his backhand isn't nearly as good as his forehand. So to me, there has been a big change in his mental side. How can a new coach help? I think priority number one is to rejuvenate him mentally. Get him believing again. Get him focused again. Cut out some of the unprofessional stuff that we've seen. Gill, what's an example of that? What about like changing your serve technique 3 days before the Australian Open when you had the second best hold percentage on the tour last year? And you think it's a good idea to just go pinpoint 3 days before the, like, what is that? I'm sorry, what is that? Just one example. So rejuvenation, I think tactically, again, strength utilization. How do we make it so that we're always making the right decisions on the backhand to minimize that weakness? How do we make it so that we're putting ourselves in a position where the strengths can be utilized and the weaknesses can be minimized? Let me give you one example of that. On the second serve, he should be back. He should never be trying to take the second serve return early. Because when he stands way up on the second serve, it's very easy for players to kick it into his backhand. He does not hit that backhand return clean when he has to take it on the rise with the driven one-hander. Rarely does he hit that clean. So he misses too many returns. He mishits too many returns and then gets in trouble on the next ball. Doesn't get enough on the ball. You know, he's got all these issues. It's so much better when he moves back, give himself time to take either a full cut on the backhand and hit it clean and just go heavy cross court. And then, you know, he's in his backhand corner where he can set up an inside-out forehand if he hits a good enough backhand cross court. But better yet, he gives himself time to maybe run around and hit a forehand. So it's much better when he stands back on the second serve return. And, you know, he's kind of always mixed it up a lot throughout the years. And for me, it's always been mixing it up. Why? There's a better version and a worse version, and sometimes you're opting to go for the worse version. So that's my opinion on his second serve return position, which is a highly specific thing to bring up, but I'm just giving you an example for a reason here, because I truly don't think this is about like a new coach coming in and being like, let's like fix this backhand. Let's fix this backhand return. Let's get it so that your backhand defense is going to be great. I don't think it looks like that. One, because there's weaknesses at this level, at this stage in players' careers. They're usually deeply enough ingrained where you can make improvements, but they're incremental. They are not, you know, extreme, and weaknesses usually stay weaknesses for a 25-year-old professional tennis player. And yes, like there have been exceptions to that, but they're exceptions for a reason. And two, you gotta be careful. And this is something that people don't think about on the internet when they're on Twitter and Reddit. And I read a lot of like kind of sofa tennis analysis that acts like good coaching is coming in with a player and just like hammering on their weaknesses. Like most coaches do not believe in that, and they're probably right. it's just like you got to realize that like tennis players are kind of sensitive creatures, and if you're focusing 90% on what they're bad at, you're probably doing some damage there in terms of confidence. And you might be making the weakness worse by making them, tinker with it and think about it constantly. Like, you just got to think about these things. Like, it's not as easy as you're just going to come in, figure out what the player is worst at, and then just like fix it, which I think a lot of people act like that's how this works. It's usually not how this works. All right. What other angles can we attack this? Look, I still have my concerns about this. I don't think Tsitsipas is in the clear. So there's two more things I want to say. One, I just have to say it. I don't think it's cool how he's handled this. Because it's the second, especially because it's the second time. After the U.S. Open last year, when he lost early at the U.S. Open to, who was it? Dominic Stricker, 5-setter. He immediately, in his post-match media, fired Mark Philippoussis. Now, he said, and Tsitsipas fans will, get on me if I don't say this, and rightly so, I should say this. Tsitsipas said, it's my fault and I take full responsibility. But actions speak louder than words in that case. When you fire your coach in the post-match press conference, you're throwing that coach under the bus. You are. It doesn't matter what words you say. When you say, I'm splitting up with my coach, an hour after the match, you're sending a message that you're sending a message there. You just are. It doesn't matter what you say. You do it the next day, that's another thing. You do it the next week, that's another thing. But when you do it in the post-match press conference, that sends a message, and we all know what that message is. Let's be real. And then he did it again this time with his father. Like, for the reaction after losing a match to be going after the coaching, it doesn't reek of professionalism and maturity, right? But, everybody's human, so I get it. It's not the worst thing in the world. For him to have done it twice, though, I can't recall a lot of other players not having the restraint when they're upset with their coach. Like, most players have the restraint when they're upset with their coach to not air it out in the post-match press conference. Right? I also have my concerns about the setup moving forward. So I think there's a tendency or you could be tempted to do a victory lap right now for Stefanos Tsitsipas and to assume that greener pastures are ahead, and that's some sort of guarantee. And I don't see it that way. This is certainly more forceful than Stefanos was last summer, but let's not forget that this is attempt number 2 at Tsitsipas distancing from his father as head coach. This is attempt number 2. And yes, it's a little bit gray and a little bit murky what the long-term plan was last August, but if you'll recall, Mark Philippoussis was the head coach. So here's the timeline. It was in 2022. It was a little bit of kind of a trio of coaching. There was I'm actually forgetting Enquist, Tomas Enquist. There was Mark Philippoussis, and there was Apostolos. Enquist kind of faded into the distance. There was Apostolos and Philippoussis, and they were operating at the same time for a period. They were trying to co-coach Tsitsipas. And then Steph said, too many cooks in the kitchen. No more Mark Philippoussis. Apostolos started operating solo. And then I think it was the start of August last year, Stefanos said he posted on Instagram joint with Apo, and it wasn't like this. It was a little more cryptic, but they were talking about their coach-player, father-son relationship. They were talking about the coaching relationship in the past tense, and it was a series of black and white photos. I mean, you read that post, and you're like, okay, this is cryptic, but it seems like no more Apostolos as head coach. Sure enough, no Apostolos for the end of the North American hardcourt summer. Just Mark Philippoussis as the head coach. And there are people on Twitter trying to tell me that the plan was for Apostolos to become head coach again after that. All along, that was the plan. Does that make any sense? Why would Mark Philippoussis agree to that? Like, oh yeah, let's run back this whole me and Apostolos thing that totally didn't work the first time. Sure, I'll sign up for that. Really? I don't think that was the plan. It doesn't pass the smell test. So I think that was supposed to be kind of a soft exit for Apostolos. Let's not make a big deal out of this, but just, shove him to the side gently without making this big public fuss, which I respect. But it didn't work because after the loss against Stricker, Tsitsipas said, I felt out of rhythm. It didn't feel right. Mark Philippoussis fired, Apostolos back in. So just keep in mind that this is attempt number 2. Much more forceful, much more conviction this time around from Stefanos, most certainly. But it's attempt number 2. And now he needs to try to figure out a setup that is going to work for him, while Apostolos continues to travel with the team. You guys think that's going to be easy? I don't. I don't think it's going to be easy for Apostolos to give up that influence and that power and kind of just be present in the day-to-day, but be secondary, take a back seat. Defer to someone else? Is that going to be easy? I mean, if he does it, great. But that seems challenging for a guy who's always been in charge, doesn't it? Not to mention we have history of it being difficult. So that's all I got. Hopefully this time around works out better for Stefanos, and that he can be rejuvenated by someone coming in and giving him a new voice. And hopefully we get a focused, determined, motivated Tsitsipas with some new ideas about what he's doing in terms of training and in terms of tactics on the court. From Gacciato. Hey, Gill, second stab at this. Thought about a bit of a hypothetical, roundabout way to ask about coaching quality at the top end of the sport. What's the maximum rank of a player on the ATP or WTA tour that you think could get insight from your analysis and videos and they aren't already getting from their coaching teams? In other words, who's the highest ranked player whose coaching team you could add value to? I'm glad you asked this, because I don't think it works like this at all. Here's where I think the question doesn't make much sense, even though I'm really glad you asked it. I am 100% confident that there are outstanding coaches, brilliant coaches, coaching low-ranked players. And there are bad coaches, who don't help, who don't have great ideas, who might have some philosophies that are outdated or might make some decisions that aren't so good for their players. I'm confident there are bad coaches coaching highly ranked players. It is not the case that I think the best players have the best coaches, the worst players have the worst coaches. I don't think it's like that at all. And you might say, wow, that's surprising. How could that be? Here's how that could be. Coaching is on the margins. Now, not when it comes to development. When it comes to development, coaching is crucial. When you are 8 years old through 15 years old, and you're building your game, you better have a damn good coach. If you don't have a damn good coach, you're in trouble. You're not going to make it. But after that, your technique is in place, your skills are in place. Then, it comes down to what kind of genetics athletically have you been blessed or not so blessed with? How hard are you working in the gym? How smart are you working in the gym? What is your mental makeup? Are you able to perform at your best mentally? That gives you the best chance to win matches. You know what I mean? This is about ability. 95% is ability. The coaches now can contribute on the margins, give a player a little boost, hopefully not, but maybe give the player a little bump down in terms of what they're able to accomplish. But tiny, tiny margins. It's mostly about a player's ability. I'm very confident in saying that. Now, that said, how could I do as a coach? Well, let's be real about what I think I do on this channel. I think that I can look at a match. Let's say my player lost to somebody and then they're playing them again. I can look at the last match they played against that player. I think I can do a pretty good job of diagnosing what went wrong and what went right, right? Just because it's a loss doesn't mean nothing went right. And then, maybe thinking about, okay, what does my player have to offer? What does the other player, how does the other player stack up? And can we come up with some ideas about what to do on court, things to focus on in terms of a game plan against that player the next time? Yeah, I think I can do that pretty well. That is a minuscule part of what coaching on the tour is, though. There are other parts of the job where I would be utterly clueless, way over my head. For example, what are we doing in practice tomorrow? I can run a junior practice, a developmental junior practice. I can do that. Why? Because I've lived it. I've been through academies. I've decided, yeah, I thought that was good, or no, that made no sense. That was stupid. I wouldn't do that, right? So ultimately, you draw from your experience, and maybe you come up with some new ideas from other coaches who you've studied. In the case, especially of development, but touring coaches, they don't build guides on this, and most of these coaches are going off of their experiences as players. I liked operating this way. I didn't like this way. And then there are leadership skills, like just plain leadership skills. How well do you listen to your player? How well do you communicate with your player? These are things that, frankly, I don't have any experience in. I think there are some things that I can do innately pretty well, and it'd be fun to give it a shot. But oh my God, no, I don't have game planning, and analyzing is a small part of what a touring coach does. And while I might be able to hold my own in that aspect, there are so many other aspects that I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't know what I'm doing. All right, next one from Lian Yang. Hey, Gill, another question. You mentioned the Alcaraz kick serve to Novak's backhand on the ad side is unsolved. How come no one else has tried that, present or past? Yeah, good question. I think it comes down to two things. One, not a lot of players like to hit kick on their first serve, especially players who feel like they have very damaging first serves. The thing is, when you hit a kick to Djokovic's backhand on the second serve, it actually doesn't work. The reason why it works for Alcaraz is he does it often on the first serve. The reason it doesn't work on the second serve is because if you're not threatening the faster serve up the tee on the ad side, then Djokovic could move far up enough in the court or deep enough, which sometimes he does on clay. He can either move back and just address the kick serve directly because he knows it's coming, or he can move up in the court far enough where, again, he's covering the kick serve out wide and not really respecting the other serves, which he's liberated to do that because it's his second serve. He knows he's not going to get burned. But on the first serve return, because he can't sell out for the kick serve, because Alcaraz might bomb it hard into his body or bomb it hard T. He's deeper in terms of his return position, and that's when the Alcaraz kick serve gets above Djokovic's shoulders. And Novak, because of how quick Alcaraz's runaround footwork is, Novak usually pulls this backhand cross court and Alcaraz hits a forehand inside in. Or sometimes mixes in the forehand drop shot inside out once he's gone inside in a couple times, and that completely wrong foots Djokovic because it's the polar opposite directional of the forehand inside in. You have to go the other way, and it's behind Djokovic's split step. So, I would say more players should hit it as a first serve against Djokovic, but also it has to do with does Alcaraz's kick serve jump higher than most other players? Yes. And that extra jump off the court matters a ton, because if Novak is getting it at a comfortable height, it's a totally different backhand return. It's faster, it's deeper, totally different story. And then, are most players as quick running around the forehand? No. So Djokovic's cross-court backhand return gets to their backhand. Well, now they're hitting a backhand down the line. Are there any backhand down the lines on tour that compare to Alcaraz's forehand inside in terms of speed, weight of shot? Not even in the same zip code. So that kind of gives you an idea. There's a lot of reasons why it works so well for Alcaraz. Difficult for other players to emulate, but other players should try to emulate it. Like Tsitsipas, there's a player with, I don't think his kick serve is as bouncy as Alcaraz's, but great runaround footwork on the forehand. He should be hitting kick wide on first serves to Djokovic. Before I get to the next comment, a word from our partners at BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. BetUS offers 24/7 customer service and the fastest payouts in the industry, live wagering on all the biggest games, and incredible variety. It's super easy to get started. Currently, BetUS is offering a 125% deposit match on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. The link is in the description. Please gamble responsibly and don't harass the players. Next one's from Enigma Paradox. Hi, Gill. Amy brought up a good point about Alcaraz playing deep on his return position against Novak in the gold medal match and rarely changed his position. Was this a tactical error in hindsight? Please also explain the finer strategy of return position as it pertains to different surfaces and opponents. Yeah, this was a great point by Amy because, I covered the fact that Djokovic's slice serve to Alcaraz's forehand was particularly effective in part because of Alcaraz's deep return position. But when you really think about what was happening, not only was Alcaraz giving a lot of credence to Djokovic's spot serving and giving that slice serve more time to tail away by how deep he was standing. And by the way, it's a serve that stays very low, so Alcaraz catches it from a low contact point. But when you think about the +1 success, the forehand success that Djokovic was having, it's down to the fact, largely, that Alcaraz was returning from the back fence and not getting a lot of depth on his return. Not getting a lot of depth on his return because he was being made to move, in my opinion. He was constantly hitting on-the-run returns, which we don't really think about because the return of serve is usually not an on-the-run shot. But when you're standing 20 feet back, it actually is an on-the-run shot. It takes extra steps to get there. You have to cover more ground, so it becomes an on-the-run shot. And then he just wasn't getting much on it. He wasn't getting the depth. It was bouncing high for Djokovic, which was a bonus, but he had all day. So Alcaraz's return, let's go through it. Was it deep? No. Was it taking time away? No. Was it coming in at an uncomfortable height? No. So it's open season for Alcaraz. For Djokovic on these +1 forehands, especially slice serving into Alcaraz's forehand. So I do think it was a tactical error. In hindsight, it was a good point by Amy. at the end of the day, also, I mean, let's cover this now. Okay, so you asked me to explain the finer strategy of return position. The further back you stand, the easier it is to get more in play. And on clay, where defense is rewarded, especially from deep court positions, which has to do with how much speed the ball loses when it bounces on the court. If you're able to get more returns in play, you're rewarded for that, because even if you're in a defensive position, especially if you're Alcaraz, you feel like you can work your way back into the point. So Nadal on clay, Thiem on clay, Tsitsipas on clay, they stand deep. They have more time to take a fuller swing on the return. They make more in play, and they're not worried that they're starting from a defensive court position, because that defensive court position on clay actually makes it very difficult for the opponent to hit through them. But Alcaraz was, first of all, only making 70% of total returns in play. So that's not even first serve return. Was it first? I forget the stat, actually. But I think it was 70% of returns in play, which means first serves in play was probably like 60%. That's not that high. So Djokovic was still getting free points. And he was hitting his forehand so big, so well, that Alcaraz was often not able to recover in the point when he did make the return in play. So at a certain point, I think it's just a matter of, okay, I'm not making that many in play. When I am, I'm not taking enough time away or getting enough depth on the ball to neutralize here. So at that point, the main benefit of the return position you're utilizing, you're not even getting that benefit. You're getting zero benefit. All you're doing is giving Djokovic more time on the other side of the court. And time is money in tennis. Now, there were some thoughts, and I guess there are mailbag questions that come up later. Let me find it actually right now, because it's related. Let's see. Okay, here it is from member Kei Sagar. Hi, Gill. Now that Alcaraz has lost again without JCF, although I did see him yelling from the box in the final, are you starting to buy into the narrative that he needs JCF at the highest level matches to make effective adjustments? You mentioned his return position, for example. So I thought Joel Drucker on 3 had a really good point. Adjustments are so often dictated not just about whether or not you're winning or losing, but how you lost. So if you crawl into Alcaraz's head after the first set, I just lost in a tiebreak and I went 0 for 8. Actually, it wasn't. Yeah, I went 0 for 8 on break points and I lost in a tiebreak. So your head is not like, oh, my tactics aren't working. Now, maybe if you're really smart tactically, if you're next level tactically, I don't know that Alcaraz is there yet, then maybe you think, okay, I know I had a chance to win the set, but let's see, maybe we make an adjustment because this particular part of my game is not working. But that's really high level. Most 90% of players are going to simply say, I just need to do better on the big points, and then I'll be in business. There's no major adjustments that need to be made here. And I think that's a good theory, that Alcaraz didn't adjust because he lost that first set the way he did. And I'm a little bit skeptical of the JCF theory because, and look, I mean, we all know that there is some coaching that goes on even when coaching is illegal. And if you're called for a coaching violation, well, the worst that happens is you get a warning. So it's not like the penalty is so scary and terrible. Not to mention, it's not, you're allowed to yell from the box, but it needs to be encouragement, not coaching. And that's very difficult to categorize and enforce. We all know this. So if JCF, hypothetically, if JCF felt very strongly that Alcaraz should move up on return, he might have been able to get that message across. We'll never know. But I don't fully buy into the idea that had Ferrero been allowed to coach, Alcaraz totally would have made that adjustment. I'm not quite on board with that. From Mr. Trust 333, Gill, would you agree that Djokovic is the second greatest clay player ever? 3 Roland Garros titles in Nadal's era is no joke. Nadal has 5 losses at RG, and 3 of them came from Nole. Thoughts? Bjorn Borg dominated Roland Garros. Like, he dominated the field. He won 96% of matches in his career at Roland Garros. And I believe he won it the last 6 times he played, right? Didn't he? I think the first 2 years of his career, he didn't win it. Then he won it the next 6, and then he retired. I think I have that right. Let me check that real quick. So, yeah, are we going to take away the number 2 spot from Borg? I don't think so. Sorry, I didn't get that quite right. So, first year he played, he lost in the 4th round. Then he won it in 74, won it in 75, lost in 76, and then won the last 4 years he played. 4 years in a row, and then he retired. Don't think we can take the number 2 spot away from a guy who dominated to that extent. Next one is from Johnny Har. Lots of people are saying Djokovic has completed tennis now. Stats show he's clearly the best of his generation, and now he has the gold, which has been eluding him for so long and has meant so much to him. What do you think his motivation will be going forward? Will he keep putting in the immense amount of work to stay at the top? Look, this is still really the question. Now, Djokovic is going to fight this. Like, let's be clear. Djokovic knows that motivation and staying fired up and maintaining the drive to work hard, that's going to be the key for the next several years of his career. I still have question marks in this area, though. We always knew coming into this year, we always knew that the Olympics were going to get him up, that he was going to show up and at the very least fight like an animal to win the Olympics. And I'll be honest right now, there are a lot of predictions that I have in my head, and for whatever reason, I keep them to myself, but I kind of have them in my head. And after Djokovic was so dominant last year, I thought he'd have another huge year this year. I thought the Olympics were going to propel him to kind of lock in more consistently from start to finish. And I thought 2024, once again, he was going to consistently be a tier 1 performer at the big events. Not that necessarily he was going to, rake and with Alcaraz and Sinner, who are worthy competitors to him, obviously. But I thought he was going to have a great year. And then my feeling has been that this was the marker for him where we might start to see some real motivational struggles. So I have my suspicions here, frankly, but let's see. I'm curious because, we've already started to see glimpses of that, obviously, outside of the biggest events. The only other thing that I want to say before I go on to the next question is the physical stuff doesn't look quite as pristine as it did last year. There have been just more issues popping up at this point. Obviously, with the knee being, the most significant of late. So that's another thing to monitor. You guys have known, I've probably said this 2 billion times on mailbags, but I've always said, man, Djokovic's body, it's not really aging at a rapid rate. And therefore, it's more likely that the motivation declines before or the motivation kind of drops off before the body does. The way we're trending. That's how it was trending. And now, I still sort of feel that way, but I feel like there's more credence to the possibility that Djokovic's body might start to break down a little bit in the form of injuries and also maybe in the form of speed around the court. I'm curious to see how he moves at the U.S. Open because I truly believe that he beat Alcaraz moving defending very well. Don't get me wrong, but not moving at the top tier level, moving like pretty good. But for Djokovic, pretty good seems like kind of bad because that's what, we're so used to Djokovic covering the court as well as anybody. So it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting. From Ritan Karoy. Hi, Gill. Couple of questions. One, you mentioned that the Olympic gold salvaged Djokovic's season. Would you consider it a successful season for him if he doesn't win the U.S. Open? 100%. I think it's a successful season for Djokovic because that was the number one goal. For me, it gets a little bit tricky for players. If you're going to say this is goal number one, they complete the goal, and then you're going to turn around and say, well, it wasn't a successful season because everything other than that wasn't good enough. That's not really how I roll. Like, for example, if Andrei Rublev makes a major semifinal, kind of a successful year. Like right now, that's the thing. So if he does the thing, it's mostly going to be a successful year in my eyes. The next one is Djokovic recently said that the Olympic gold is probably his biggest sporting success. Where do you rate the Olympics as a title in tennis? On par with an ATP Finals, Masters 1000, or 500, given past winners and non-winners? And then also about your last week's question on doubles specialists and singles, Leander Paes won an Olympic bronze at Atlanta in 96 in singles. Yeah, but wasn't Leander Paes a pretty good singles player? I think so. And then he became a double specialist once he got too old, which is a different thing. But I'm pulling up Paes. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I mean, he wasn't that... Yeah, okay. I thought he was better, actually. Because Paes, between 1994 and 1999, was between 150 in the world, and his best year-end ranking was 91 in the world. So he was pretty much one of those players, it seems, a borderline between challenger level. So, okay. Good shout. I mean, that's a little different than Matthew Ebden, who hadn't played a singles match in 2 years, but I'll give you that. Leander Paes. Okay, good call. Okay, you're asking me at what level is the Olympics in terms of importance? It's a separate category. I'm sorry, I wish I could answer your question in a more concrete way. It's a separate category. I think that it's its own thing, It's so unique. It's so different from the ATP events, especially now that there's no rankings points. How do you quantify it? How do you quantify an event that Djokovic calls his greatest sporting achievement and Sebastian Korda said, nah. Ben Shelton said, pass. And it's not just the Americans, okay? A lot of players, or plenty of other, right? Dominic Thiem, nah. I mean, how do you quantify that tournament? You can't. By the way, I'm not talking about Thiem this year because Thiem wanted to play this year. I'm talking about 2016. The reason I think about Thiem when it comes to the Olympics is he's actually the cautionary tale because in Rio he could have played and chose not to. In 2021, he couldn't play in 2021. He was injured. And then this year, he wanted to play. The ITF gets 2 legacy spots that's reserved for gold medalists and former Slam champions. And I know they used one on Murray, and then did they use the other on Stan? And then Thiem didn't get one. I'm pretty sure that's how it went, because Nadal used his protected ranking, I believe. But anyway, total digression. Kind of sad, though. And it shows you that when you're a young player and you skip the Olympics because you think you have other chances ahead, you never know. And Thiem is your example of that. Next one from Vinny. Hi, Gill. With my hometown tournament in Montreal taking place this week, I'm I'm left myself asking the same question I do when I go every year. Is it better to splurge a bit on center court tickets in the hopes of watching a good match featuring some elite players, or to settle for a grounds pass and watch some players in the 20s and 30s play up close on the outer courts, as well as watching some of those top players practicing? I was wondering what you recommend and what your game plan is attending a tournament purely as a fan. I myself settled on taking a day to go around the grounds, taking in as much as I can, and then ultimately watching the night session on center. As a listener of 5 years, thank you for providing the best tennis analysis on YouTube. Thank you. That's very kind. Here's my philosophy on this. Good question, by the way. So if you are going to get the live experience, to me, you want to maximize the difference between that and watching on TV. And if you sit in the upper deck in a big stadium, or if you have like decent seats in a big stadium and you're watching a great match, maybe a phenomenal match, an elite match, look, it's great, don't get me wrong, but it's more similar to being on your couch and watching a great match on TV. Whereas if you are front row, close to the court, watching world number 50 play world number 30, and you're right up there, it's nothing like watching on TV. It's a totally different experience, and it's a great one that everybody should have. So I recommend grounds pass, get up close. That is where you're getting the best and most unique experience out of the live product of tennis. Also, kind of that a la carte feel, bouncing around court to court to court. I also think that that's something that's really fun about the live tennis experience. You get more of that with the grounds pass than you might on a stadium where you want to kind of utilize and get your money's worth for the seat that you likely paid a pretty penny for. That said, night sessions, also really nice. So I think you played it perfectly, but I always recommend to people going to live tennis that they find a way to get close to the action at some point. All right, running out of time, but I want to hit two quickly. This one is from IDK Bob. What are your thoughts on Sebi Korda? Obviously, he's been on tour a while, but DC was the biggest title of his career, and at one point, he was getting a lot of hype as the next American star. Is DC a sign that he's beginning to find a new level? So yes, and he beat Casper Ruud today. That match I didn't see, but I did watch his match against Fritz. I called it, actually. Look, I think Korda is serving bigger. That was a must. It's something I covered a lot when he was a young player. He was an offensive player whose serve didn't put him on offense. That's a problem. You got to serve big when you're 6'5", and you're not going to make your money defending. So serve bigger, check. Play with more fire, more intensity, check. Like, he has been, over the years, I think, too chill. And I think that he just needed to dial it up a little bit. The fight, the intensity. A lot of good net play. I think he showed that as a young player, but he comes forward smarter now. He feels that out. He knows when to come forward a lot better. And then his forehand, I'm not going to say like Korda's forehand got way, way better, and that's why he's playing well. But it's not losing him as many matches. That's the key with his forehand. He just needs to make it so that it's not killing him, which last year, oftentimes it was. So those are my thoughts on Korda. I still need to see a little bit more, because it's just, Korda has been a very hot and cold player throughout his career. So I want to see more than a great couple weeks. I would like to see him sustain a little bit more consistency than he's been able to, personally. And then the last one, I will end on this one from Jake, LOL. Hi, Gill. Do you think Nishikori is one of the most talented baseliners of all time? In my opinion, the way he moves and his clean hitting is something out of the ordinary. Yes. Look, the way I've always described Kei Nishikori, he is Novak Djokovic light. It's like everything that Novak Djokovic is, you subtract it by 10 percentage points and you get Nishikori. But ultimately, the fact that, like, he's got this very, very stable, sound technique off of both wings, including the two-hander, which I think is one of the prettiest two-handed backhands ever. And it's a very subjective thing, but to me, it's one of the prettiest to look at for some reason. Plus, like, the small adjustment steps with the feet, very efficient. The balance when he moves left to right is great. But the serve never developed as a weapon. The power never quite got to, I think, the level that he would need to be imposing offensively. So it takes a lot of really great point construction and, beautiful redirections in order for Nishikori to kind of get on offense. And then physically, he hasn't been the dynamo. He's good physically. He's got this great 5-set record. He's got tremendous endurance. He is quick around the court. But is he a guy who's like, is he Ferrer tough from the back of the court? Is he Djokovic tough from the back of the court, where it's like, I'm not going to miss. I'm going to run corner to corner like an animal, no matter how many times I will play a 30-shot rally, I'll play a 20-shot rally, and I'm just going to be tough as nails and stay in it. I don't think Nishikori has ever been that guy where he's just this physical beast. Nishikori, he's lacked that, like, that superlative quality in any one area. And to me, that's why he's had the career that he's had, which has been like this incredible career, but he's always sort of been second tier at his best, third tier, never top tier. So great to see him back. He's playing Arnaldi right now, actually, on my TV as I record this. Fantastic to see him back. I hope he stays healthy because I want to watch him a whole lot more. Thank you, BetUS. That'll do it. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.